From top-secret CIA files to Oswald's connection with the KGB, these are the JFK Files, Part 1. Number 8. Agency CIA. Subject: JFK assassination, Oswald, and KGB. According to an intercepted phone call in Mexico City, Lee Oswald was at the Soviet embassy on 28 September 1963, where he spoke with the consul Valery Kostikov. This information was gathered when Oswald called the embassy on October 1st, stating the above as fact. During the conversation, Oswald asked if there was anything new concerning the telegram to Washington. According to a FBI liaison, this phone call was most likely related to Oswald's U.S. passport or visa matters. This is where things get a bit complicated. Kostikov was an identified KGB officer. According to this file, Kostikov was part of an operation sponsored by the KGB's 13th Department, which is responsible for sabotage and assassinations. The FBI learned about Kostikov's ties during Operation Tumbleweed. While it is not uncommon for KGB agents to have open contact in Soviet embassies, it was known that very important agents can be met in official installations using as cover for their presence there some sort of open business. The third page of the document shows proof that the above statement is true. What does this mean? Well, most importantly, Lee Harvey Oswald still had dealings with the KGB and Russian officials after leaving the USSR. Number 7. Agency FBI. Subject: political and subversive actions. Let's skip to page 4 of the report. What do we see? Lee Harvey Oswald was being investigated for connections to a pro-Castro group based in New Orleans. Wait, New Orleans? Yes, if you haven't heard, Oswald was actually born in New Orleans. His family later moved to Dallas. In a video, you can see Lee Harvey Oswald passing around Fair Play for Cuba leaflets in New Orleans. The date of this recording is August 16th, 1963. Oswald's connection to the Fair Play for Cuba committee was being investigated since August 9th, 63, and continued on until October of 63. The document also suggests that Harvey was the main person in the New Orleans organization, stating that the organization, which appears to have become inactive since the departure from New Orleans of Lee Harvey Oswald. Side note, is it possible this is Ted Cruz's dad? That was the hot new conspiracy theory 1 year ago. Considering nothing substantial has surfaced in these documents, it's safe to assume that Ted Cruz's dad didn't have anything to do with Oswald or JFK. Probably. Number 6. Agency CIA. Subject: MI5. In my opinion, this is one of the most mysterious documents to be declassified. The British Security Service, MI5, has reported that at 18:05 GMT on November 22nd, an anonymous telephone call was made in Cambridge, England, to the senior reporter of the Cambridge News. The caller said only that the Cambridge News reporter should call the American Embassy in London for some big news, and then hung up. According to MI5, the phone call was made some 25 minutes before the president was shot. Now, what the hell is this about? Some random newspaper in England receives an ominous call like this? The odds of this being a prank phone call are insane. It's a little calming to know that this wasn't the only strange phone call received throughout England that year. So maybe it was just lightning strike luck. Number 5. Subjects: Pravda, Izvestia, FBI conspiracy theories, and ultra-right coup. Did anyone ever stop and wonder how the JFK assassination was received in the Soviet Union? Well, according to one reliable FBI source who was in Russia at the time of the assassination, the Soviets greeted the news with great shock and consternation. Churches rang their bells in memory of JFK. Higher-ups in the Communist Party were freaking out because they thought this was a coup by the ultra-right in the USA. Things got really serious. The Soviets felt that those elements interested in utilizing the assassination and playing on anti-communist sentiments in the United States would then utilize this act to stop negotiations with the Soviet Union, attack Cuba, and thereafter spread the war. As a result of these feelings, the Soviet Union immediately went into a state of national alert. They were also afraid that without leadership, some irresponsible general in the US might launch a missile at the Soviet Union. They further went on to describe Lee Harvey Oswald as a man who had no connection whatsoever with the Soviet Union, a neurotic maniac who was disloyal to his own country and everything else. Boris Ivanov, the chief of the Soviet Committee for State Security Residency in New York City, held a meeting in which he described JFK's death as planned by an organized group rather than being the act of one individual assassin. Ivanov stated that the KGB had to figure out what group it was with the greatest possible speed. The documents go on to describe Oswald's stay in Russia. Apparently, Oswald was interviewed by the KGB. The KGB deemed him mentally unstable and told him to return to the USA once his visa had expired. At some point, Oswald missed a sightseeing tour he was supposed to go on. His hotel room was forcefully opened. He was found barely alive with one of his wrists cut. After the incident, he was allowed to stay in the USSR a bit longer. Remember document number 8? The intercepted phone calls between Oswald and the Russian embassy in Mexico? This document also mentions the phone call. Oswald really wanted a re-entry visa, but the KGB decided it was pointless for them to deal with Oswald. In the last page of this declassified document, there are excerpts from a few Russian newspapers about the Warren Commission and how they handled the case. It seems that even back then, people thought we were not getting the full story about the crime of the century. Number 4. Subject: Conspiracy theories, CIA involvement, and the Rockefeller Commission. In the deposition of Richard Helms, the discussion was focused on CIA activities and involvement in Vietnam, specifically the claims that the CIA was responsible for the death of Ngo Dinh Diem, the president of Vietnam. Wait, hold on. Who is Richard Helms? He was deeply entangled in the intelligence community, starting off at the Office of Strategic Services during World War II and ending up as the Director of Central Intelligence from 1966 to 1973. Helms goes on to say that President Johnson used to go around saying that the reason President Kennedy was assassinated was that he had assassinated President Diem, and this was just justice. And out of nowhere, this document becomes insanely interesting. The interviewer asks, is there any information involved with the assassination of President Kennedy which in any way shows that Lee Harvey Oswald was in some way a CIA agent or an agent? That's all, folks. The document's cut off right there. Why even bother releasing this document if you're going to tease us like that? Number 3. Agency NARA. Subject: Mark Lane and Tribunal Ludo. According to a confidential informant, a correspondent from Tribunal Ludo, a communist Polish newspaper, met with Mark Lane, the attorney hired by Lee Harvey Oswald's mother. They discussed the theory posted in a far-right Italian newspaper that states Oswald was not the murderer. The article went on to state a policeman by the name of J.D. Tippit was the actual assassin. Later on, Tippit met with Jack Ruby, who killed him. So does J.D. Tippit exist? Yes, but the declassified document spells his name wrong. J.D. Tippit was shot and killed 45 minutes after the assassination of JFK. Multiple witnesses placed Oswald at the scene of the crime, and the spent cartridges were tied to the revolver found in Oswald's possession. Now, did Jack Ruby kill Oswald? Yes, he did. Did Jack Ruby kill J.D. Tippit? Highly unlikely. Number 2. Subject: Organized crime, assassinations, foreign leaders, anti-Castro activities, CIA, Cuban files, anything in between. This is an 84-page document that deals with the organized crime, assassinations of foreign leaders by the CIA, anti-Castro activities, and other CIA-related topics. Again, it is 84 pages. I have links to all these documents in the description, so feel free to read through them. In summary, the CIA doesn't give a damn about laws, borders, or anything else. Number 1. Agency FBI. Subject: Jack Ruby Associates. This report starts out in a pretty damning way, describing Jack Ruby as a person who had a good in with the Dallas PD on account of his B-Girl operation that the police turned a blind eye to. B-girl, meaning bar girl, a woman who is paid to entertain individually or as a performer. This is the nicest way to put it. Most people stop reading there, but the report goes on to say that Ruby was a huge publicity hound with emotional instability. The informant goes on to say that he knew of no contact between Ruby and organized crime elements. More importantly, he knew of no connection between Ruby and Oswald. Extra, extra, extra. Before we get too serious, just remember that the same government that some people believe orchestrated the crime of the century also released regulations governing mountain climbing expeditions in Nepal, most relating to the mythical Yeti. It was allowed to photograph the animal, but not kill it, unless it was an emergency. Any news of the Yeti's existence had to be submitted to the government of Nepal and withheld from public newspapers. Check out the featured comment below, subscribe for more World and Earth, and I'll see you in the next video.